I am proud of myself. I did it. I ran 100 miles over the mountains of the Eastern Cascades in Washington State. It was hot, it was hilly, it was high altitude. It lasted a lot longer than I anticipated, and it was hard. But I did it. And I have the belt buckle to prove it. Look at that. In this episode, I'm going to talk about Devil's Gulch, a 100 miler in the Pacific Northwest. And I want to start off by saying registration for this event in 2026 is now open. So you can get a little discount with the code TOMMY, TOMMY. I want to thank Evergreen Trails, the organisers of this event, for giving me entry and getting me out there. I wouldn't have been able to do this without their support. It was a big shot for them, and I really genuinely appreciate it. If you're in the area, or you could see yourself maybe travelling to this beautiful heavenly part of the world to take on either their half marathon, their 50 miler, or even the next 100 next year, sign up now and ask questions later. This was the most epic ultra experience I've had to date, and I couldn't say more positive things about the event itself. There's a link in the description if you want to check that out. I really highly recommend Devil's Gulch. Okay, how did it go for me? Well, let's talk about it. So this episode is going to be a bit of a recap, a race recap, and I'm going to try and do it chronologically, bring you along for the ride, as it were. And I think the best place to start for that is pre-race. So I spent a good 10 days out in Washington State, in that area of the world, by myself. I rented a Jeep with a roof tent on it, and off I went solo into the mountains. I spent the first sort of couple of nights just trying to get used to being by myself out there in the Jeep, so I didn't go too far out into the mountains. I went round to the Olympic Park, beautiful part of the world. I then dropped my phone out of the window and smashed it, and then was in the middle of the mountains about an hour from the last time I remember having signal. Not that that mattered, because I'd smashed my phone completely. And I was about 3 hours from, maybe 4 hours from Seattle, if I had directions on my phone. But I'd smashed my phone. So I had to head all the way back to Seattle with no phone. It was a whole journey, an episode in and of itself. I managed it though. I managed to get to an Apple store in Seattle. There probably was an Apple store before then. Who knows? But I didn't know. But I managed to get to one an hour before they closed, and they fixed my phone. Big up Apple Care. This is not sponsored. So that was fine. That was the first episode of the trip. But other than that, everything was perfect. I was just spending time out in the Eastern Cascades and the Northern Cascades, where it is beautiful and probably most like BC, most like British Columbia over the border. Really spectacular views. And I was just letting myself feel calm and switched off and focused, really. I didn't really spend much time out there doing any work. I would sometimes stop off in a lay-by when I had 5G and check my emails and, open the laptop and hotspot and do a couple of bits. But overall, I was really not working by any means. I was out there just trying to soak it in. You see, it's been a dream of mine for a good while. If you listen to the sort of pre-race episode, what was that episode? I should have these written down, shouldn't I? But it just comes to mind. What episode are we on now? Episode 45? 46. So if you listen to 44, if you haven't already, That's me pre-race, preparing. And you'll get a good understanding of sort of where my headspace was. I was about to embark on something that had been a real genuine dream of mine for 5 years. And so I wanted to soak up the environment. I wanted to make sure that I was really taking it in, to be honest. And so I was really relaxed and I was just tapering. I was, doing my training very easily, but I was swimming in rivers and I was by myself. I was, filming content, which I love to do. I love to set up the camera and get good shots and all that sort of stuff. It's just on my own, enjoying myself. I was cooking out of the back of the Jeep. I was sometimes heading into small towns and eating there. But I was just really having a dream trip, to be honest. And through that whole trip, I felt an immense amount of gratitude. Now, it's really hard to communicate this sort of thing to you because, I don't know, I feel like it's sort of, it sort of gets mixed up in the not so genuine online gratitude that's out there. And maybe I'm cynical of others, but I feel very grateful for you. I feel grateful for the position I'm in to be able to talk about what I love and help people with what I love, with what has brought me meaning and purpose and a whole lot of help in my life. And I feel very privileged to be in that position. And on top of all of that, I feel extra privileged to be able to facilitate going out to the States to run a 100 miler. That to me is not the sort of thing that little Tommy really dreamt big Tommy would be able to do. But I now get to travel a lot and I get to go out to these places, see amazing places, explore, adventure, and I just feel incredibly grateful for it. So I was overwhelmed by this sense of gratitude. I was feeling very introspective. I was journaling. I was, doing all the sorts of things that you would do whilst alone. And to be honest with you, I think one thing I would say about my mind is that it's become a bit less existential. When I was maybe a bit younger, I think if I'd gone on a solo trip like that, I'd have probably had a existential crisis or a massive shift in my career path or whatever. But these days I feel like I'm just I think I'm in a better place and I'm able to sort of be out there solo, just taking it in, feeling grateful for my life, and I feel a little bit more level-headed and calm. And that was helpful for going into a race like this. I think it's easy to, when you're consuming a lot of ultra running content or running content generally, you might feel like there's a lot of people out there who do these sorts of things, 100 milers and stuff. But the reality is it's a really, really small subculture. And not many people are capable of doing it. And not many people would even want to embark on something like this. So it is a big thing, and I think it requires some maturity to be able to do a 100 mile. It obviously requires physical endurance, and there are really young people at the moment doing these crazy things. But those young people who are able to do these things are also very mature, you'd say, for their age. And I think that I guess what I'm saying is this sort of ability to be out there alone by myself for 2 weeks and take on a unsupported 100 miler 8,000 miles from home. I don't think that's possible for 22-year-old Tommy, or at least 25-year-old Tommy, or 26-year-old Tommy who started running ultras. I don't think he was solid enough in the noggin to deal with that. I think that's worth saying. So, the pre-race holiday was amazing. I feel very privileged to be able to have that sort of thing. Hey, just a quick intermission because I want to talk about my coaching. Every month I take on a new intake on the first Monday of every month. And that basically means it's just a cohort of new clients that I'll be working with. It's all basically designed with strength as the core, as the focus. So many runners, yourself might be included, know they need to strength train, but neglect it because they don't know really what they're doing. Well, if you want some structure, if you want a program laid out for you, if you want the opportunity to truly learn how to put that plan together, how to structure your week, if you want an ever-growing repository of information and resources, and if you want to connect with other like-minded runners who want to strength train for the mountains, that's what this is. I'm working really hard on trying to build it out and make it as good as I possibly can. It's $79.99 a month. We'll have a private chat so you can throw videos of your form and get form feedback from me. We can chat about your programming and work together to try and get you training in a sustainable way, enjoying the process, making sure you're durable and resilient for the mountains, and as a byproduct, taking on new challenges and proving to yourself that you're capable. There's a link in the description for this episode. If you're listening to this much later than it was released, there's a new intake every month, so it's still relevant. It's the same link. And as always, I appreciate your support. So the race was held up in Mission Ridge, which is a ski resort in season. And I headed up there. I had some camping at the start line. So I was going to just sort of wake up and get my stuff together and then go to the start line. Pulled up, and what a view. What a view at the campsite at this ski resort. Amazing. And the sun set, and it was a beautiful sunset. And we had our last meals set up, ready with all of our stuff for the next morning, and tried to get some shut eye. I got probably about 4 or 5 hours of sleep, 5 hours possibly, and then woke up with a good amount of time to spare so that I could do all the pre-race things. I had a big bowl of cereal, I had a banana, and I had one other thing outside of coffee. I had about 3 coffees and did all the things I need to do at home, and then headed off to the start line. Start was at 5 a.m, so nice and early. You know, all the pre-race prep is in the dark, and then you get out there, filled up water bottles, and then before you know it, basically you get the brief done, the sun's rising, and you're off. And you're straight into the trails in this race. Straight into the trails. You go down for about 100 meters, 150 meters, and then you're right onto the trails. So you're at the trailhead. So there's none of this sort of running through a town or anything like that. Like a lot of European races, you'll be running through a sort of mountain town, running up the hill, and eventually you get to the trails. With this race, you're straight in there, straight in the trails, and hiking up. There was a group of 4 or 5 of us who were at the front, and I think all of our strategy was just to try and chomp up as many miles as we could in the sort of pre-sunrise time. The sun was just rising, so we maybe had like 1 or 2 hours of cool temperature. And so we were all sort of at the front, went past the first water station. I think I skipped it. I can't really remember it, to be honest. I've got notes here. At mile 3, 5K in, you got a water station. I think I skipped it. Maybe did fill up and do a little bit of a situ. And then you get to Mount Lillian, which is first. That's the first drop. You have your drop bag there, and this first proper aid station. That's about 25K in, and stopped, filled some things up. It was a bit slow, but I was trying to be fast at that aid station, but it felt a bit slow. But it was all good. We just carried on, and then we went up to the top of that peak, and very technical underfoot, but that was epic. The view there, you could see Mount Rainier, the famous Mount Rainier. The views were huge and 360 and panoramic. It was just amazing. And, you know, it was at that moment that we were really soaking in the views. I think, you know, you're super psyched about it. You're feeling good. The sun's just rising. You're at this, you're seeing these views. I think these are the moments that are probably, you know, my favorite moments. They're just the purest enjoyment of the trails. You feel good, you're running over them. You've got a long way to go, but you've got this anticipation, but you're also just soaking in the views. So this sort of this sort of lollipop route around, back up to sort of Mount Lillian, around up to this peak. That was the first sort of spit off the main loop, the main map. And so we came back down to Mount Lillian, and this is where I made my first mistake. I when I got down to Mount Lillian for the first time, there was a big sort of crowd of 50 milers. The 50 milers had started now. And they were all there sort of doing their transition. I got sort of caught up in their transition, but I was still sort of early on in my race and I wanted to sort of make progress. So in the rush of it all, I had a lot of carb mix in my bag, and I was able to swap around and fill up a couple of carb mixes and a couple of waters. So I had 2 litres, all 500 ml each. And then I just left, and I forgot that there was a drop bag there, and I had a plan to execute, which was to pick up a certain amount of carb mix and all this sort of stuff. And as I was running away, I was like, will I regret that? Will I regret that? And I just sort of carried on thinking I'll be all right. I think that was the first pure mistake I made. A real hit, really. But I just was like, I'll be fine. I'll just keep going. I've got enough to push me through. I don't know for sure whether I did truly have enough to push me through. At this stage now, the sort of group of 4 of us that were at the front had sort of had spread a bit more, and there was 2 of us. We were in kind of pairs, I believe, and then we were on our way down to the aid station Tronson, which is not a drop bag aid station, but they did have a great setup. On the approach to Tronson, the views, again, beautiful scenes, amazing views. You can see Mount Rainier as you're just running over this ridge that you're on, and it's very hot at this point. It's starting to get really hot. I'm sweating a lot. I've got sun cream sweating into my eyes, which was a whole thing. I had this episode of about 2 or 3 minutes where I'm just fighting this blinding pain in my eyes and discomfort and trying to wipe off the sun cream. Awful. So I kept telling myself not to put sun cream on my forehead and just to cover it up with the cap. For that reason, kept forgetting. Don't know why. But that was a tough moment, which has just come to mind. But yeah, we had spread out a bit, and I got down to Tronson, and I actually passed the front runners. They were on their way up, and we had a good high five, and down to Tronson we went. I got some ice. I needed some ice, and they had some ice ready for me, so I put that in my hat, and so that melted on the top of my head for the next sort of 2 hours. And I was feeling good at this stage, although I was probably not consuming as much as I possibly could in terms of electrolytes and carb mix. I think at the beginning of a race like that, you just have to really load up and be consuming a lot. You can't really play catch up with these things, and you'll be forced to play catch up if your body gets to a point where there is electrolyte imbalance, or you just have an extremely low amount of calories. It's going to be sort of an hour and a half to 2 hours before any of it sort of kicks in when you consume it. So you do want to overload at the start, I think. At least I would say that's a good idea, given that you're also later on in the race just unlikely to feel like wanting to consume these things. It's going to be a lot harder to consume as much. So at the beginning of the race, I think the key issue that I faced was I just wasn't fueling enough. That is the reality. I think I was going to try and make excuses to my coach Jack and say that wasn't the case, but I just simply wasn't. I had skipped a drop bag. I wasn't tracking it. I lost track of time a little bit, and hours went past, and I hadn't really consumed maybe as much as I would like. But I was getting through about a litre. I was getting through about 500 ml to a litre of some sort of liquid, whether it was carb mix, liquid, fuel, or water. So it wasn't like I was having nothing, but there's clearly so much more that I probably could have that would have helped. And so, future takeaway from that I can apply to a future race is just having probably double what I was having in terms of carb mix and fuel, and just forcing it down a bit more at the beginning. And then it was after Tronson, we had about an 8-mile stint to, is that right? No, we had about a 14-mile stint. So you're going from about mile 30 to mile 44 to Mission Creek. This was where it started to go really south for me. I fell over. for the second time. I had fallen over before Tronson. Both falls were soft, but it's sort of, you feel a little bit more beaten up when you've had a big stacking. So I had a big stacking twice, and so I was a bit like wavered. My attitude had been knocked from that, because you just get a big shock from it, and on top of it just being hard, you just feel like you're sort of fatiguing. I never fall over on a training run, for example. It's only ever when I'm fatiguing. So I'm 2 marathons in now, and I've fallen over, and I'm feeling quite beat up. And I come into Mission Creek. There was a water stop before Mission Creek, which actually I think I was lucky to have water there. I think later runners, I heard rumours that later runners didn't have water there, so they were really struggling, because you're talking about a 10-mile trek to up this hill, all the way, and down actually, all the way from Tronson to this water stop, and then you got an additional 4 miles to Mission Creek. So it's a long way to go, even, if you run out of water within that 10 miles. It's a long way if you've got sort of 6 miles to go in that sort of temperature on that part of the route. That's tough. And then I came into Mission Creek feeling like I had never felt before on any race I'd done. I've never felt as fatigued as I felt at 75 kilometers, 44 miles in. I was truly riding the struggle bus. I had white stains from my sweat all over my shirt. I was clearly completely fatigued. My chest was tight. My legs were aching now. I was really coming in feeling like I'd not done a good job executing this race. It had beat me up already. I was only 44 miles in. So I came into that aid station, and my only priority for that aid station was just to chill out, just to stop, to remember I have a lot of time, to remember that my focus for this race is to complete it simply. It doesn't matter what time I do it in, I just need to complete it. And I just committed to spend as much time as I needed at that aid station to feel at least a bit different from how I felt going in. At this stage, I was thinking of, I was having quitting thoughts. I was thinking about what it would mean to DNF. I was having really invasive thoughts that were telling me I wasn't capable. And that was tough for me, because I was alone. I didn't have any crew that, I didn't have any crew with me. I didn't know any of the staff. Everyone there was a stranger essentially, and I didn't have anyone to really help me out, and help me sort of change my mindset. So it was all me. I had to sort of coach myself out of that. I did have some people around me, some people I had met before that were helping me out, and it was definitely helpful to have cold water from the creek poured right over my head immediately as I got in. And he had this big jug, and he poured it over the back of my head, and he said, just say when you want me to stop. And I didn't speak, because I just wanted the whole thing over my head. And so that was helpful to get my core temperature down. And then from there, it was just a case of sitting there, eating as much as I could, and just chilling out. It took me about an hour to turn things around and to stand up, to put my shoes on again, and to start heading out. At that stage, I really did feel like spirits were much higher. I felt like I was in a good state of mind. I was going forward. I was striving. I had a march on, and I also had the perspective that the race is long. I'm here to complete it only. Pace yourself, enjoy yourself, take it in. So I was in a good space, a good headspace. I voice noted Lou. I told her that spirits were much higher, things were going well. I had obviously told her that things were hard and I'd fallen over twice and all these things, but I told her that things were looking up. And at this stage, she will have been in bed, I believe, or going to bed. So who knows? I think maybe it was, I think it was probably nighttime here in the UK. And then I started trekking up this hill. It was very exposed, a gentle hill, but not one that you'd be running up on a 100 miler. Definitely one you're marching up. But it was so exposed and hot, and it was just coming down right on us. This was probably the hottest part of the race so far, was this incline. And it was brutal. It was brutal. Halfway up this incline is a water only station. This water station was a bit of an intersection. Up the way in the same direction I had been coming, you would carry on up that route. And there was another option to turn right, and behind the other side of the water station. And my watch was telling me to turn right. So I trusted my watch. I was always trusting my watch. So I carried on up this hill, and I had been going for about 4.5 kilometers, and I sort of noticed that the dusty, dry, sandy mud that we were walking over, characteristic of a lot of the trails out there, was fresh, or at least had some dirt bike marks on it, other than the new imprints that were being made by my feet. Now, I wasn't first in the race. I was at this point coming, I think, fourth, and I didn't expect to have me making the first imprints on the floor. I thought, what's going on here? And then it's sort of, I thought to myself, maybe the dirt bikes have gone over the trail after the first 3 people have gone through. And then pretty shortly after that, I thought to myself, am I going the right way here? Should this not be an aid station? Should there not be an aid station here? I was about 2 miles up. I was like, I should have 2 or 3 miles up. I was like, I should have an aid station here. But there wasn't one for a long time. And my watch was telling me that the next aid station was a very decent climb up after a descent. There'd be a massive ascent, and you get to the next aid station. But I can't on my watch see which aid station that is. There's no name to it, just a dot. And I thought, this doesn't look right. This is freaking me out. No, and I was sort of in denial. I was like, this isn't right. But what? No. And then I looked further on my map on my watch, and it just stopped. Bear in mind, we're about 80k or more from the end. And I just look at my watch and I think, what is that saying? That's saying in about 10, 15k, the course just ends. And it suddenly occurred to me, when I took out my phone and I looked at my race plan and I looked at which aid station I should be going to next, I knew. My heart dropped. I had been going the wrong way up this incline. I climbed about 200 meters or something, I think. And I've gone about 5k, about 3 miles, and I'm going the wrong way. My heart sank. I'd gone from going into Mission Creek aid station feeling worse than I'd ever felt before, mainly because of the heat, and just feeling like I'd completely messed up the race, to feeling great about things, feeling positive, having the right mindset, feeling like I wanted to charge for the rest of the day into the night, take aid station by aid station, segment by segment. I was ready, and now I'd gone the wrong way. I'd managed to rally, and I was given another challenge. I couldn't believe it. I just didn't know what to do. I thought, if I go up to Devil's Spur, which was the next aid station, the one that I was mistakenly going to, but wasn't for a good while, I'd be disqualified because I hadn't done Horse Lake, which I was supposed to do. A whole loop, a whole sort of climb up to Horse Lake, and then a 4-hour loop, and then a descent. A whole thing I'd missed. So I'd obviously be disqualified. So if I was to complete this race, the only thing I would be allowed to do and could do was go back the way I came. So I did just that. I managed to convince myself that I just had to get down there. I could probably get down there. If I can get down there, I can get up and carry on the route I was supposed to be on. And I could get to Horse Lake aid station, and then we can have a think when we're there. And so I did that. I went down to the water point. I cursed my decision. It was all the signing was all clear. I just didn't read it. Horse Lake is up this way. If this is the first time you're seeing this sign, go up this way. Said something like that. It was very clear, written for dummies, but I didn't read it. And anyway, here I am walking up the way I was supposed to come. I had a bit of a laugh about it. And then I was trekking up, and it was very hot still. And I was trekking up. And there was one stage where I, with every outward breath for about a minute, I just had a little weep. Because I thought I'd completely screwed this whole thing up. I'd travelled 8,000 miles. Evergreen Trails had supported me to get there. I had, told stories on here about how I was preparing and how much it means to me and all this. And I want to show people that you can do these things. And I was just a mess. My narrative was that I'd failed and I wasn't able to do it. And I'd messed it up. But I got up there to Horse Lake and I was feeling all right. I was at Horse Lake. I was okay. The sun had just sort of started to set. And so it was getting cooler. And I sat there, and Jake, the front runner, who ended up smashing it and winning, he was there with all of his crew and his paces, and they were really good, valuable company. They got me out of a funk I was in. I don't think they even realised they did, but they did. Just their presence was fun to be around, and that got me ready. After a good while, I saw Rob, second place, a Canadian dirtbag bruh. He was smashing it up, but he came in saying that Horse Lake loop that you're about to do is really tough. He had a rough time on that loop, and off I went to do it myself as the sun set. As I sort of climbed this loop, I bumped into a photographer who probably shared about a kilometre with me, and that was beautiful. I loved that. I was jealous of all the pacers at that point, of all the people with pacers, and as someone who was unsupported, to just have a photographer kind of run behind me as I climbed this incline was nice. And so I had that was a little boost, and then the sun set. As the sun set, as the sun sets, you feel quite lonely, I think. At that stage in the race, at least, I felt relatively lonely because I'd been alone struggling with these things for so long. And that's another battle that you have to just endure and deal with, is this solitude that is sort of like no other. You gain solitude from a daily run, you can gain solitude on a long hike on a Sunday, but this solitude that you experience on a race with not many competitors out in the Eastern Cascades of Washington State at night after running about 80 kilometers. This is solitude that I had gone 90 kilometers. Just to clarify, that was something to deal with too. A lot of the races I've done that have gone through the night have sort of started at the night. So sunrise is sort of 50, 60k in, like a midnight start maybe. But this one, obviously, you start at 5 a.m. So you go into a full day, and then you're going into the night, and then probably into the next day. So the nighttime, how did that go? Well, after after Horse Lake, we did the full loop. And then you go back to Horse Lake. There's a drop bag there. I sat there around a fire for the second time I was there, and that was good vibes, much more chill vibes. I was still very much hanging on to the narrative that things weren't going well for me. This was still the story I was ultimately telling myself, and that was a story that never that I never managed to get rid of. After the first half of the race, I still had this voice in my head, ultimately, that things had gone badly this race, and the best you could possibly do was just hope for a finish. That is what got me to the finish. But I would say, as a reflection, it is possible for you to say halfway through a race that is going badly that things haven't gone completely badly. It is possible to look at the entire race and focus more on the positives, because the bad things are inevitable. The slip-ups, the mistakes, the struggles, it's all inevitable anyway. So you might as well just take that on the chin and really search for how you can paint a good picture of what's happening. So I left Horse Lake and I went back down to that water spot only to go back up to Devil's Spur and start retracing my steps where I made the mistake. So this is the second time I'm going up this incline. Should be the first. So I was climbing through the night to get there. This was a big climb up to Devil's Spur. I don't think I realized as I was going up the first time how big the climb was. I'd been climbing for ages and I'd only done about a quarter of it, or not even, actually. Really, I'd done hardly any of it. And I'd been climbing for a while. So Devil's Spur was a big climb up to Devil's Spur, and it went through the night. In the final sort of hour and a half, I needed some music. So I whacked on Bon Iver's new album, and I just was screaming badly. I was singing badly to it out in the mountains on my own. At this point, I was going full crazy. I was going full nutcase. I was in a good mood. I'd made loads of progress. I was still here. I was still doing it. I was in a good mood. It was cool. I was feeling good. I was fueling well. But I was going stir crazy up to Devil's Spur. And as I sung along to Bon Iver, I started to hallucinate. I saw a man with an easel painting the scenery. And when I saw that person painting the scenery, my first thought was, why are you painting the scenery? You can't see it. It's pitch black. And then my second thought was, oh, it's not a man with an easel painting the scenery. That's a tree stump. So I saw that. And this was, to be honest with you, I was like sort of half hallucinating the whole rest of the race. I would see stuff in an invented form, and then it would sort of regain its normal form, and it would be something else. Like I was convinced I saw a crab crawl from the road to the side of the road, and I went up to the crab, and the crab was looking at me and wasn't moving, and I used my pole to poke the crab to try and get it to move, and I moved it, and it was a pine cone. I suddenly saw it as a pine cone, what it was. Many times things like this happened. I saw a big boulder, massive boulder the size of a car, and I thought it was a minivan, like tent setup. I thought it was like a camper van by the river, and then I came around the corner and it was just a rock. I saw tree stumps, burnt down tree stumps I thought were bears. I saw that quite often. I saw a tree stump and thought it was a bear. I thought there were people when there weren't people. I thought there was a whole crowd cheering me around the corner, and I came around the corner, and the things that I thought like I'd seen, like I thought I'd saw sort of waving flags and stuff, that was just leaves. Lots of hallucinating going on in my run up as the sun rose to Devil's Spur. I got to Devil's Spur. As I was there at Devil's Spur for the first time, I saw the sunrise. It was just orange in the sky just as I was at that aid station. So that was a magical aid station. It was nice. It was just me there and 3 or 2 staff people, and 2 volunteers. And then off down I went, down to Mission Creek again. Mission Creek was where I was at kilometer 75 mile 44. And that was where I was having a really tough time, really struggling. But this time round, I was going to be in a better state. And that was a tough descent, you know. I wanted to make the most of the fact it was a descent by running all of it. But, you know, it was tough on the legs, and it was just really hard going. It was a long old descent. And at that stage in the race, you're 73 miles in to 85 miles in. So it's a good 12-mile descent all the way down this beautiful trail. Really nice running down there, but it was tough. I was, as I said, I was hallucinating a lot, and I was sort of nodding off as I was. Anytime I would break into a walk, if there was like a flat or an incline and I wasn't running, I would start falling asleep. I would start sort of nodding off. So the only way to stop myself from nodding off and sort of falling over on the trails was to run. So I was running quite a lot just to stop myself from falling asleep. Finally got down there, you know. And one thing I would say is that I've never taken a rest other than like at an aid station. I've never sort of stopped on the trail and taken a sit down during one of these ultras, but I did that quite a few times in the second half of the race. In the final quarter of the race, I would take a break and just stop, and I wouldn't even be walking. I would be, you know, stop and sit on a log for like 15 seconds, 20 seconds. And sometimes I did that, and a couple of times I sort of sat there for a minute or two just to take a breather. But I don't really much like doing that because you're not making any progress, and it's amazing how different some sort of speed is to zero. You can really lose, you know, it's 3 minutes is just lost very easily. 5 minutes is lost. 15 minutes gone very easily, and you have to run everything you are still for, if that makes sense, in time. So I don't like sitting still, but you know, it was needed. I was knackered. So got down to Mission Creek, back down, and I was in a better state of mind, and here they fed me well, and there were a lot of fun there. That was a good aid station. I was in a better mood, and we were looking down the barrel from the 85 mark to the 100 mile mark. Bear in mind, this whole time, by the way, I've done an extra 6 miles. Just want to highlight that. An extra 6 miles has already been clocked. So I'm actually at like 90 something miles in, and I'm staring down the barrel of like the final 20 miles, and it feels like the end. It feels like we've done it. We just need to finish off. It feels like the end. The sun's risen, but it's just the final stint. But then I do some calculations, and because of the amount of incline, actually, funnily enough, we have to do the same loop, the same incline again. Because of that same incline up to Devil's Spur that we're about to do again, it's going to take me about 6 hours in the heat. And sure enough, that was a tough climb. I think, you know, if the first half of Devil's Gulch goes well for you and you manage to like finish up in a really good time and not have to endure the morning heat, you've really got off. You've got off well there. You've executed well. If you have to endure the next day in that heat, it's so hard. So that was it, completely exposed heat, climbing up this mountain to get to Devil's Spur before the final 3 mile leg. It was hard. I called Lou at one stage. We'd had 7 hours of no contact, of SOS signal. So naturally she was worried. I called her. We managed to have 2 hours of good chat. Some of it was shit chat, but most of it was good chat about just anything really, and just to pass the time as I was going up these hills. And throughout that 2 hours, I went from being a nutter, shouting who's going to carry the boats and running, to feeling sorry for myself, leaning on my poles in a shaded spot that I had finally found, taking a break, needing to just keep moving. But we managed it. We kept pushing. We got to Devil's Spur. I had a drink there. I took a beer. They had beers at Devil's Spur. which was like 5k from the end. They had beers. I didn't drink a beer, but I took one with me, and I got to the finish line. I managed to. I noticed that I was gonna be just, coming close to 33 hours. So I started picking up the pace because I was like, it would kill me if I got 33 something. So I got a sub 33. I managed to get in about, I think, 2 minutes from the end. And I was incredibly proud of myself, and I felt awesome. And it was a tough day, but I can't believe I got to the end. I got my belt buckle. Can you see it? I got the belt buckle. They also gave us a coaster, which is cool. And I made a dream come true. I managed to push through what was like the toughest ultra experience that I've ever had, the hardest race by far, and I'm incredibly proud of doing that. And I think for anyone who's doing their first 100 miler, the goal should just be to complete it. There shouldn't be any expectations. I think the goal should just be to complete it and then to come back and start looking at performing and that sort of thing. But for me, anytime anyone completes a 100 miler, now that I have experienced a difficult, hilly, high altitude, hot 100 miler ultra marathon, I know for sure that this is the real deal. And yeah, it feels special for me. I think I'm speaking too soon, but I'll have other goals. I think I have goals to run other 100 milers. I don't think for a while it'll ever get sort of any longer than that. I think I'll play around with the 100 mile, 100k distance all over, and I'll go to cool places, and I'll just look for races that are interesting to me. But this was really a goal for many years that has been something that has guided me. And so I hope that I can have another thing that's similar to this 100 miler, but I don't want to hang too much need to have a big goal like that on it. I think, I'm interested in this stuff enough to keep just doing races that are interesting to me. And that's what we're looking at. Looking at possibly doing Corsica, UTMB. There's a race in Corsica. I think it's a UTMB race. Thinking of doing that next year. And there's others that I have my eye on. So we'll see. Key takeaways then. Should we think about some key takeaways? Key takeaways for this race. The first thing that comes to mind is eating and consuming a lot early. I've always gone by the sort of rule of eating little and often throughout, which I think is still a good idea. But I think that early on in my race, I need to be consuming far more. I need to be just working a lot harder to consume a lot more. It's very easy to fall into the trap of just thinking, I'm all right, I'll just focus on my running. I'm just running along here, I'm fine, I don't need to consume. You need to figure out a way to consume as much as you can and really stay on top of that stuff. So that's the key takeaway number one. Consume a lot early and then little and often. So frequently, a lot early, often, just eat a lot. Consume a lot of electrolytes in that sort of temperature. I've neglected to mention as well, as I sit here, I can't believe it. I've neglected to mention the cramp that I experienced. I can't believe that. I feel like I need to re-record the whole thing. Throughout the period in this story that I've just told you, where I was saying it was really difficult, as part of that difficulty, I wasn't just exhausted, I was cramping. And I can't believe I've neglected to tell you. I was cramping from about 50k to 85k. I was cramping for a good 7 hours or something at aid stations and running, to the point where on this incline, this very exposed incline up to Horse Lake, I was I was cramping on every step, and I was almost immobile. And then when I got into Horse Lake, I've posted this video a few times. I've videoed my calf, but everything was just cramping. And that was one of the big concerns for me through this race. One of the big concerns, and the reason I felt like I was going to DNF, I really can't believe I've neglected to include this. I'm not very good at race recaps, am I? One of the reasons I thought I was going to DNF was because I didn't know if I was going to solve this cramping issue. And I managed to solve it. Pickle juice, loads of electrolytes. When the temperature dropped, I was able to catch up with that, with the electrolytes that I, needed. And I think that helped. Now, I've said before on the podcast, and I'll say it again, the jury's still out on whether electrolytes, scientifically, whether we can prove that electrolytes actually does help cramping. But being out there with others, operating as if it does, I'll tell you, I think that more electrolytes would have helped me. It helps me. Personal experience, anecdotal, not evidence-based. I'll say all the caveats. But staying on top of my electrolytes and having more, because you are losing so much in that heat. In that heat, you're losing so much sodium and all sorts, and you need to catch up with that. It's almost impossible. It's genuinely almost impossible to keep up with that sort of loss. So you need to be just loading it up in that sort of temperature. And I would say that it is only reserved for that sort of temperature. If it's really hot, if you're really sweating a lot, don't want to overconsume needlessly on electrolytes, but you should be pounding them at the beginning of a really hot race like this. So yeah, I can't believe I didn't mention the cramps, man. The cramps. So I had mad cramps. That made it super, super difficult to run. It made it super difficult to move for a good 7-hour period. And that was the period also that I went the wrong way. So I had cramps. I was completely hot and fatigued. I went the wrong way. It was all a mess. And that's why I cried. That's why I had a little weep halfway through. But when the sun dropped, when the night came, my cramps slowly dissipated and I was able to just run, and I didn't cramp again. After the night I didn't cramp again, and through the night I didn't cramp. I was just aching and struggling with heavy legs. So second takeaway will be to figure out how to manage cramps, and I think personally that has to include electrolytes. It has to. The third takeaway will be that although you may think that a race is going exceptionally bad, although things may have not gone well for you in the first half of the race, try not to believe that narrative. Try not to identify with this narrative that things have gone badly. Things are going badly for me. Nah, it's not my day. Yeah, bad day at the office, not happening for me. All of that was what I was believing, and I think I was having to fight against that unconsciously. I was sort of okay with the fact that it'd gone badly, and so I was able to finish. But I think it is possible to turn things around, so much so that you can actually turn a bad day into a good day. So the third takeaway is, even if it's going bad, it doesn't have to be a bad day. You can change your perspective. You can try and coach yourself into thinking positively. And then the fourth and final takeaway is that I am more capable than I think I am. And I think that's the same for you. 75 kilometers in, cramping, completely screwed over by this race, hot, tired, feeling like I should quit. I kept going. And I kept going until I finished the race. That is not something in that moment at 75k or in that moment when I went the wrong way that I believed I was capable of doing. But that evidence that you give yourself when you do something like this is super powerful. And it's something that I think everyone deserves to have. Real, complete evidence that you are more capable than you think you are. With that, I will thank you for listening. I want to say that if you're watching this on YouTube, I really appreciate your support. If you want to watch this, it will first be available on YouTube, and then a week later, we'll be uploading videos on Spotify. So the Spotify version is going to have audio first and then video a week later. And so on YouTube, you'll have the video available immediately. Thanks for your support. Thank you so much. It really means the world to me that you listen, that you rate the podcast, that you share it with your friends. If you want to have a go at a 100 miler, if you are interested in Devil's Gulch, registrations are open now. You can get a little discount with Tommy at checkout. Evergreen Trails, Porter and Katie and the team there are just so amazing. They're really nice people. They put on a genuinely fantastic event. It's so good. It's so well put on. It's supportive. It should be much bigger than it is. I hope it one day grows in size. I believe that it will retain its humble tone, and I mean, the route is brutal, but it is the most spectacular, beautiful route that I've ever run an ultra on. Thanks for listening. Run the runnable. Keep showing up for yourself, and I'll see you next time.